Imagine waking up one morning to discover that the money in your pocket, the savings in your bank, and even the salary you're expecting tomorrow are worth almost nothing. Shops are empty, bread costs more than a month's wage, and desperate families carry wheelbarrows filled with paper notes just to buy food. This wasn't a scene from fiction. It was the reality in Weimar Germany in 1923, when one of the most devastating and forgotten currency collapses in history shook the foundations of Europe. Hyperinflation turned the German mark into confetti. Overnight, life savings evaporated, and trust in money itself shattered. But here's the shocking truth. This collapse wasn't just about economics. It reshaped politics, set the stage for dictatorship, and changed the trajectory of the 20th century. And yet, this isn't only about Germany. Currency collapses have happened again and again, from the fall of the Roman denarius to Zimbabwe and Venezuela. Each time people thought, it can't happen here, until it did. So today, we'll uncover the forgotten currency collapse that changed history, the mechanics behind it, and what lessons it carries for us now, especially in a world where debt is soaring and inflation quietly chips away at our wealth. This isn't just history. It's a warning, because if money is only paper-backed by trust, what happens when that trust disappears? The seeds of collapse were sown years earlier. Germany entered World War I as one of the most industrialized nations in Europe. But war is expensive, and instead of raising taxes, the government printed money, convinced they would win, and forced their enemies to pay. When Germany lost in 1918, the bill came due. The Treaty of Versailles demanded staggering reparations, 132 billion gold marks, payable in foreign currency or gold. Germany, stripped of resources, had no choice but to print even more paper marks to buy the foreign currency it needed. At first, inflation crept quietly. A loaf of bread that cost half a mark before the war rose to a few marks. But by 1922, the printing presses were running day and night. The government insisted it was temporary. The public wanted to believe it. But every new note pushed prices higher, and faith in the currency began to evaporate. The mark's collapse was more than economics. It was a political earthquake. Middle-class families, once comfortable, found themselves destitute. Pensioners who had saved their whole lives saw everything vanish in weeks. Resentment brewed, not just toward the Allied powers, but toward their own government, seen as incompetent or corrupt. This is the hidden truth about currency collapses. They don't just destroy wealth. They destroy trust, in money, in institutions, and in democracy itself. By late 1922, the German mark entered a freefall. Each new banknote printed to pay reparations and salaries only worsened the problem. Prices began doubling every few days. By 1923, they doubled every few hours. Economists call it the death spiral of hyperinflation. Once trust in money breaks, no government printing press can restore it. Imagine this. In January 1923, one US dollar cost about 17,000 marks. By November of that year, it cost 4.2 trillion marks. Salaries were paid twice a day, because waiting until evening meant your wages lost half their value. People spent money as fast as they got it, not on luxuries, but on bread, potatoes, anything that held real value. The wealthy who had assets, gold, foreign currency, land, survived. The middle class, who had savings in banks, were ruined. This destruction of the middle class wasn't just financial. It was psychological. Generations who once believed in stability learned that everything could collapse in months. Hyperinflation also changed behavior. Barter returned. Farmers refused to sell crops for worthless marks. Cities starved while the countryside hoarded food. Looting and riots erupted. And in the chaos, radical voices grew louder, promising to restore dignity and order. The forgotten lesson here? Hyperinflation is not just about money. It's about survival, fear, and the desperation that pushes societies toward extremes. Hyperinflation wasn't just an economic collapse. It was a collapse of trust. Citizens lost faith not only in their money, but in their leaders and in democracy itself. The Weimar Republic, born after the war to bring freedom, now looked like a regime of chaos. Middle-class professionals, teachers, lawyers, doctors, suddenly begged on the streets. Intellectuals who had preached progress now despaired. Newspapers reported suicides of families ruined overnight. A generation raised to believe in security instead felt abandoned. And history shows. When people lose trust in currency, they often turn to extremes. In Germany, the resentment of this era planted the seeds of political radicalism. The cry of "stab in the back," the idea that corrupt elites betrayed the nation, spread like wildfire. The forgotten truth is this: hyperinflation wasn't only about rising prices. It was about the psychological devastation of an entire society. When citizens can't trust their wages, their savings, or their government, democracy itself begins to feel like a lie. This is why studying currency collapses matters. Because behind every worthless banknote lies a broken promise, and broken promises can destroy nations. By late 1923, Germany's government had no choice but to start over. The old mark was worthless. A new currency, the Rentenmark, was introduced, supposedly backed by land and industrial assets. But the truth was simpler. It worked because people wanted to believe in something again. One Rentenmark equaled 1 trillion old marks. Overnight, wheelbarrows of money became single bills. The government promised strict limits on printing, and for a time, stability returned. Shops reopened, farmers sold food, and wages began to mean something again. But this reset came at a price. The old middle class never recovered. Savings accounts remained worthless. Generational wealth built over decades was gone forever. And though inflation was tamed, trust in the system remained scarred. Germans had learned a brutal lesson. Money could vanish, and so could the security of democracy. This fragile stability set the stage for the next crisis, the Great Depression. And when that storm hit in 1929, the memory of hyperinflation haunted every decision. People didn't just fear unemployment, they feared another collapse of money itself. And in that fear, they turned to leaders who promised absolute stability, no matter the cost. Today, most people remember the Great Depression, but far fewer recall the Weimar hyperinflation. Yet its impact was just as profound. It wasn't just about money. It was about fear, anger, and a broken social contract. Historians often say the collapse of the German mark was the silent prelude to the disasters that followed. Without it, the rise of authoritarianism in the 1930s would have looked very different, and that is why forgetting it is dangerous. Currency collapses are not confined to history books. They've happened in Latin America, in Africa, in Eastern Europe, even in parts of Asia. Each time, people insisted our system is different. Each time, they were wrong. The German mark's death is a warning to modern economies drowning in debt. Running printing presses and hoping confidence never breaks. Because confidence is fragile, and once it snaps, recovery is far harder than anyone imagines. So what does this forgotten collapse teach us? First, money is only trust. Without belief, paper is worthless. In 1923, trillions of marks couldn't buy bread. Today, trillions of dollars, euros, and yen exist, backed by the same fragile idea of trust. Second, currency collapses destroy the middle class. The rich protect themselves with assets. The poor already have little to lose. It's the middle, the teachers, shopkeepers, and families with savings, who lose everything. That's why hyperinflation breeds anger and instability. Third, history repeats quietly. Few in Germany in 1914 believed their mark could collapse. Few in Venezuela in 2000 believed their bolivar could collapse. Few today believe the US dollar could ever collapse. Yet history whispers, every empire's money eventually fails. The forgotten collapse of Weimar Germany changed history not because of numbers on a chart, but because of the human despair it unleashed. It turned hardworking citizens into beggars, it shattered faith in democracy, and it opened the door to extremism. So here's the haunting question. If another currency collapse came today, in a world of instant digital panic, global debt, and fragile trust, would we even be able to stop it? History says no. The collapse comes slowly, then suddenly, and when it does, those who remembered the past will be the ones best prepared for the future.